is a leading international renewable recruitment company. And he's responsible for the growth and development of Taylor Hopkinson's brand in North America. So his experience spans multiple industries, including renewable energy, oil and gas, and the infrastructure. And through this experience, Brian has gained a strong understanding of the hiring process and needs of clients within the renewable industry. So he's going to introduce the expert panel, and afterwards we'll have a Q&A so people can get their questions answered. I'm going to turn it over to Brian. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey everyone, I'll start from my left. Vipul, he is the Senior Manager of Procurement for EDP Renewables, sorry. He manages both their solar and wind portfolio that they have. Clint is the Vice President of Construction for Wilburow's T&D and Renewables. He handles all the day-to-day and running operations for the construction group. Then you have Steve Earhart, who is the Houston Area Manager for M&S Engineering, and I'll let them go ahead and kind of introduce themselves further and their backgrounds in a few minutes. I wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and our partners HREG for putting this on for you guys. I know that me personally, coming from the recruitment industry, I get a lot of questions from people who aren't in renewables on how to get there. And hopefully tonight we'll be able to answer some of those questions that you guys have about that process and some interest within the renewable space. I did a little research before coming in today and just kind of seeing where the job market is for renewables and clean energy. And I found out that over 3.3 million Americans are directly employed by clean energy companies, which is quite impressive compared to the global amount, which is over 8 million. So the US holds over 40% of all clean energy jobs globally. With that, the renewable industry itself is one of the highest or fastest paced growing job markets in the country, growing 12 times faster than any other industry here. So you kind of see that there is definitely growth and development. Most recently, the renewable industry itself, if you break it down, there's about 370,000 people employed within solar. There's over 100,000 employees in wind, and hydro and geothermal energies are sitting about 70,000. There's a pretty big section of the job market that is sitting in front of you right now today. So hopefully, like I said, those guys will be able to provide some more insight of what you guys might be looking for if you are looking to make that transition into clean energy. So I'll hand it over to Vipul.
Intro or
Yeah,
just general? Okay, can you guys hear me or do I need this microphone? Okay. Vipul Devlak, I work at EDP Renewables, like Brian said. Just a bit of background, I worked in oil and gas for around a year and a half, mostly because I couldn't get a job in renewables right out of college. I graduated in '09 when a little thing called the financial crisis was rearing its ugly head, and the other little thing was fracking had just emerged in a real way. So natural gas went from 10 to 12 bucks to $2, $3, and renewables was being slaughtered competitively. So I had to do the oil and gas thing for a little bit, and I'm very grateful for that experience because it was enlightening to learn about the industry a little bit. And then I switched into, that was in Houston, I switched into renewables because I went to an event like this and ran into someone. It was breakfast instead of evening session. I ran into someone and we got chatting, and I said, hey, I can do XYZ. Do you have a job for me? And he said, yeah, I do have an opening. And transitioned into EDP Renewables, which is a developer, operator, or owner-operator of wind and solar assets. And now I lead their capital equipment's purchasing group. So we're responsible for purchasing and making technology evaluations of wind turbines on the wind side, solar panels, inverters, and racking systems on the solar side.
All right. This always get word how far to put these things away. My name is Clint Thurman. I've been in the renewable industry now for I guess about 13 years. So in 2004, I got drug into my first wind farm. My story's a little different. Been in high voltage since '97. Grew up a lineman. got out of the apprenticeship program as a lineman and moved into substations. Somebody at some point convinced me to take a salary and come into an office, and I've just been drugged from place to place after that. Renewables has been good to me just for the full fact that I got into it when it was still new here in the States. A lot of the people who were teaching us were all Europeans, and then just stuck with it. And lo and behold, 10 years later, still doing it. So as things progress and everything moves forward, look forward for the ride.
I'm Steve Earhart. I manage the Houston office for M&S Engineering. We've been in Houston now for the last 3 years. I've been a manager for an engineering company for 3 years. Prior to that, my background is much like Clint's. By trade, I'm a journeyman lineman. I worked my way up the ladder as a groundman into the apprenticeship program. Through it, got my journeyman's ticket. Worked as a crew foreman, a superintendent, an area manager. Had an opportunity to work for several of the major renewable companies in the nation as an electrical superintendent for them. I've built many wind farms on the electrical side of it, the collection system, the transmission lines, the interconnect stations, the substations. 3 years ago, I got a call from the owners of M&S Engineering, who I'd worked with over the years. They wanted to open an office in Houston, and they were looking for a person that they trusted to come in and grow the business, manage it for them, and move the company forward in this part of the state. And they wanted me. For what reason, I don't know, but I got drugged into the office and been there since, and I can tell you that there are tons of opportunity in the renewable industries for anyone that wants to make that transition from the oil and gas field. You may think, well, oil and gas is all I know. It's not. You have got a toolbox that is full of tools, skills that you use on a daily basis that will transition right into anything that the renewable industry has to offer.
Do we need to turn this one on as well?
Yeah, probably.
It should already be on. Thanks, guys, for that introduction. What I want to do now is kind of set up as an open forum. So we're here to answer your questions, what you guys have. I know nobody wants to be the first one to ask a question, so I'll go ahead and ask our panel the first question, and then you guys will take the lead from there, okay? All right, perfect. I think the biggest question that a lot of people have in the room, and myself, and you guys can take a stab at it if you want, are what skills do you guys look for in potential candidates that may not have a renewable background that could translate into what you guys do day-to-day wise?
Okay. You take us out. All right.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's like transitioning to any industry, a willingness to learn and ability to learn quickly. I don't think anything we do is rocket science, at least not that much of rocket science. So it's all learnable. In my side of the business, which is a mix between technology and commercial, critical thinking is also a valuable skill to have. And again, that's prevalent in any profession. So I don't look for a specific renewable experience when I've been hiring. It helps, but it's not the foremost criteria.
All right. And I hope y'all can hear us here, so that way we're not just passing that back and forth. But running the construction division for a high voltage company. Many of y'all may or may not know Wilbros is an oil and gas company. I'm probably sure most of y'all know that. I've spent the last 18 months trying to rebrand at least my division. So in my industry, it's a high voltage industry. My renewable focus is probably a lot different than some of the other guys up here. But we handle the actual construction of the solar or the wind farms themselves. But regardless if it's wind or solar, you got a substation, well, if it's solar is small enough, I guess you don't. But you typically get a high voltage substation, transmission line, or a gen tie, and you got collection systems. It's normal construction. So if you've got any kind of construction background, whether it's civil or foundations, land clearing, any kind of electrical, structural, everything stands on some kind of structure whatsoever. So there's across the board. Don't look at it as from I've never built a wind farm. That's fine. I've got people who have worked on a dozen wind farms that have never built a wind farm. Half of them have never touched one of the turbines, and every one of them, they were a scheduler for every single wind farm. They were a procurement agent, or they were an assistant project manager. So don't walk into it thinking that I've never built a wind or solar farm. Think of it as I have these skills, how do they correlate? At the end of the day, it's construction. We make wind and solar seem difficult because we want everyone to think that we do cool stuff. It's not actually that hard, I promise you. If I'm very simple-minded, you're smart enough, you can do it.
From the engineering side, I'm looking for someone that I call it has some snap. You might say that has some ambition, that wants to do something with themselves, wants to advance in the company, that has some self-starting, that has some drive to them. I look to see if they've got any previous drafting experience. If they've worked with CAD, we've got many different design software programs that we use depending on who our customer is. They can work you in to allow you to energize. There's a lot of things that people take for granted that, well, it's just flipping a switch. Well, it is, but it's not. There's a lot of things that are done behind the scenes that really dictate some time-consuming efforts. So with that snap, that drive, that self-starting ambition, it is critical.
Perfect. Thanks, guys, for that input. Now, with that first question out of the way, let's hand it over to you guys.
How much resistance are you getting from unnamed entities now that you're involved so much in the renewable energy industry? I mean, are you getting a lot of pushback from specific industries that are not renewable? Do you find government regulation more difficult? Are you running into any interference?
You want to speak from an owner's side on that?
Yeah, I can speak on an owner's side, and I'll keep it briefish. Nothing out of the ordinary that you wouldn't expect under business as usual. There are always challenges depending on which state you're building in, or which country for that matter. We've built in Mexico, we've built in Canada, different countries, different issues, and the US is much the same. Different states, different levels of resistance faced from either the locals or the counties or so on and so forth. But by and large, our job is to make those people agree with what we're doing and bring them on board, right, to understand the benefits of what we're doing to the local communities. So that's how we view our role, and by and large, they do eventually see that.
And I would add, I would overemphasize that as well. The only times I've ever been shut down on a project was in California, and they actually didn't know what they were boycotting. So once we explained to them that we were building a wind farm and that you're actually shutting down green energy, they all stood around and looked at each other kind of awkwardly, had a little meeting amongst themselves, and then finally let us all go back to work because they were blocking our road. But beyond just the regular government regulations that have stopped me from building transmission anywhere, not really.
We haven't had any problem with any pushback from any agencies or utilities. We work for a lot of the major utilities here in Texas and across the nation, and it's pretty much business as usual, whether we're working for one of them or we're working for one of the renewable companies.
Yes, sir.
Going off what he said, if it's not those sorts of things that are holding back renewable energy, what are some of the biggest challenges y'all face, and how do you think that we can solve them?
To be more specific,
In Texas, for example, not a lot of solar energy, at least, around where we live, compared to some of the other places in the world. I know China's developing a lot of solar farms right now. What do you think are some of the biggest reasons that solar isn't taking off in the United States the way it might be in Canada or something?
yeah, so I mean, I would not to contradict you, but I would check those facts. The only places that I know of that build more solar than wind, for example, is Africa. And we have proven that in Africa, it's better to do solar than it is wind, is because you can't transmit the power. The infrastructure is not there in Africa. So in places where you've got not as much load, for example, I can put a small solar farm right outside of a village in Africa, in Chad, for example, that's where I was working, instead of trying to build a wind farm somewhere and then transmit the power. That infrastructure is not there. There's a lot of solar and wind, both, all across the United States, except in the southeast where they don't allow wind. And there, I would say, that's where I would say that more of the contradiction. There's a lot of solar that you just don't know about. A lot of those farmers have got out there in fields.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, last year we built 8 gigawatts of wind in the U.S. and 14 gigawatts of solar. 8 gigawatts is the equivalent of 8 large nuclear plants, and 14. So solar has been drastically increasing. To your point, though, China in the first 6 months of this year has built 24 gigawatts. So are they beating us? Yes, in terms of installed capacity, but the trend is pretty clear on that front. We are building a lot of solar. We expect that to continue. There's a few trade issues that may jeopardize that long term, but in the post 2020 phase, we definitely see solar as being the dominant.
And I think one of the big things too, to go along with that, the major companies that are building the solar farms, the utility scale farms, they're looking for where they can have easy access to transmission lines, to be able to get onto a grid. Where can they get the best bang for their buck, so to speak? Where can they get the best contract for their power purchase agreement? Where can they get the parcel of land big enough at an economical price to build that farm? All of those things are taken into consideration and weighed by the different companies that fund these projects.
Right, well, and off-takers. We were discussing before this thing started. I've got a 100-megawatt project that we've got the land, we've got the landowners, even got a PPA signed, but couldn't find an off-taker. It's just north of Amarillo or Abilene. So there's sometimes it's not regulation, it's not the project, it's not the landowner. Sometimes we just don't have anyone that it's feasible to buy it from. Oh.
I think you had a question.
Yeah, no, I was just, when you said trade issues, so I know know there's like a case going on for Suniva solar panels, and I'm not sure where y'all source your solar panels or the companies that build your solar farms, where they source it from, but you have been in the industry for a while. Have you seen these kind of trade issues play out and influence kind of hiring cycles based on, I don't know, new trade policy?
I mean, coming from the recruitment standpoint in the trade case, I don't want to get into that because that'll be an hour-long conversation of what's going on with that. You know, I've seen for working with recruitment companies, working with a lot of solar people out there, you know, there has been a trend where hiring has slowed down a little bit, but the uptake is on the contracting side. So it's not that we're going to, you know, at this point in time for my clients, they're not slowing down the install rate, the construction rate. They're just looking at different avenues of employment for their people. So, you know, they're not kind of caught if something does go south.
Yeah, I had a question about just trying to find a job in this industry. Is it any different than standard industries in terms of it? Everybody tells you your network is really important. I got a really good network for my traditional job. I have a very limited network when it comes to renewables. How do I go about changing that, or how important is that?
It's pretty important, but I think you're doing the best thing possible, which is being here.
Getting in these kind of networking events.
I can start on Monday.
Yeah. OWIA, places like that. I mean, anything that's going to be associated with OWIA or SPI, look for those kind of conferences, and that's where it's focused on. That's all renewable focused groups. It's the two biggest events. Well, now there's 15 OWIAs, so I guess the two big
Yeah.
ones.
Every other week,
and
they've
SPI.
got a conference.
And we're a friendly bunch, so I've got several messages through LinkedIn that I do respond to.
No.
Yep. The guy in the blue polo.
Yeah, I think I have two questions. Question number one is about I know all the panels, what you guys discussed is more of a wind and solar. I know renewable is a huge topic. What about geothermal? Number one question. I mean, if anyone has any experience as far as the industry, in future 5 to 10 years in the world, not just this country, in the world, geothermal, where you think the skills may be needed in that area? That's number one. I mean, what kind of skills one wants to transition from one renewable or non-renewable field, career field, to geothermal? Number one. Number two, as far as the future, not just 5 years, 10 years, I know many careers at this moment, they're switching. Instead of having more laborers, you have more technology.
Yeah.
That will replace more actual people working in that kind of substations or stations in wind farms in other areas.
Not in
What
our
do you think
industry.
about that?
And
I'm
Okay.
like you, Clint. On the construction side, the actual building of the projects, I don't see robots taking the place of humans.
Yeah, there's certain jobs they're not gonna
Not
get.
in our lifetimes, I don't think. Someday, I don't know, 50 years.
I haven't seen a
50,
robot with
60
spurs,
years?
so.
No, I hadn't either.
I mean,
But-
because, the reason I'm asking that China is going very fast in that area, using robotics, just to do that.
We'll say
For
geothermal.
manufacturing, for sure.
Yeah, geothermal. I built a solar farm right next to a geothermal farm, or a geothermal unit. I don't really know what they call them. They had a lot more people than we had, for example, once their construction kicked off, but they weren't doing anything different than we were doing. We had laborers out there, we had operators, we had journeymen. Theirs was a lot more drilling. I don't know, maybe you know more about
No,
what
yeah.
they're doing, but I mean, essentially, the guy tried to explain it and dumb it down for me was that they drill down to a certain depth where they're getting heat. They run a pipe, and they run it back, and then essentially the earth is heating that pipe. He told me that the major flaw with it was that if that tectonic plate or if anything changes underneath it, you literally could have a geothermal unit one day and tomorrow it's off. And it has nothing to do with you, it has to do with the planet itself. Where, and I think that's a risk profile a lot of companies kind of shy away from. I'm not an expert in that area, so we'll, I guess, stick to more of the construction industry. They build the same things that we're building as far as going to the substations. They were done faster, so it was a smaller project. So you may see that ramp up, but you're going to have the willingness to move around more than you may in wind or solar, if that makes sense. So like with a small duration project, you may only be in Texas for 3 months, and then you're gonna have to be in Canada, and then you have to be wherever.
And just to, I mean, as you're describing that, that sounded very similar to something the oil and gas industry is very good at, drilling.
Oh, yeah.
So it sounds quite translatable.
Oh,
Yeah. You got a question?
Yes, I wanted to ask what you think about marine renewables, energy from rivers, energy from waves. There have been some efforts, but I wanted to see what you think about it.
It's not my industry. My company is focused on solar and wind, so we haven't looked at hydro or small hydro, let's call it. But I know there's a lot of development around it, and the DOE has several funding programs to get that spun up. You guys,
yeah,
you may have more.
Wilbrose is not in it. I personally, I've only been at Wilbrose for 16 months. So for those of y'all that's not, I bounce around a lot. In renewables, that's a whole different story. So we built the transmission line in California off of they call them tidal turbines. Not to be pessimistic about it, but it's very costly. The technology is beautiful and see all their models and how it takes the first wave and how the undercurrent rotates it back. Very cool. But if you think alignment's expensive, try a scuba diver. So, the wages, the cost of install is drastically more increased. And and unfortunately, we're run by costs. And if I can get it for 10 cents a megawatt over here, or 10 cents a watt over here, and it cost me $3 over here, then they're gonna keep going the other way. The technology is there. We actually were talking about offshore wind, and we were talking about it's in Central America. There's a man-made river that it's essentially filled in by a channel. So the river is always constantly at a certain level, and it's got power behind it. And they put in these water mills, I guess if you want, on a 30-degree angle, and they stabbed it down into this river. And it'll turn it and crank it just like a turbine on wind. But the guy who was telling us that he went down and developed part of the project, he said, there's not a city within 100 miles. He's like, so there's no load. So where these rivers are at or where these locations are, he said, who wants the power? Right. So unless you want to go in and build this huge infrastructure of transmission, so some of those projects don't kick off, the technology is there, but maybe the need isn't there.
Cool. In the back. Yes, sir. No, you, yeah.
All right. Hi, I went to kind of the opposite direction. I was in energy storage for the last 2 years, doing a project, and I'm in oil and gas, so it's funny how it works. But my
how could you?
Is,
how could you?
What sort of things ways are you guys integrating storage, whether it's batteries or into your sounding grid scale, utility scale, renewable projects? So that, and then are also, I think there's like a jobs themed talk. Are there any technical colleges or universities programs that you guys are specifically looking at sourcing from? There might be some students here that would be interested in that. I certainly valued from my associate's degree in smart grid and renewable energy. So are you guys feeding from any local universities or schools that might be worthwhile pushing someone into who was interested in this field?
You're more from the owner's side on that, so.
Yeah, I can't think of specific schools. There's one that's escaping me. That's
Texas Tech has a
Texas Tech that has a really good wind tech program. Thanks for reminding me. And I know a lot of our technicians come from having done programs there, especially in the local Texas wind farms. They've got a great testing ground as well for emerging technologies, and they're always doing a ton of cool stuff. So we have them over to always update us on what they're working on.
Battery storage?
On battery storage, we have not done any storage yet, EDPR specifically. We would really like to. Energy storage is, as everyone's probably aware of, a game changer. And costs have finally come down to make it economical or have line of sight towards being economical. Lithium ion has come a long way, and part of that has been the EV, electric vehicle driven thing. But costs have come down from, I would say, around like 60% over the past 3 years or so, which is just an incredible pace of growth, and it doesn't seem to be slowing. So definitely a big, we foresee in the future always being able to offer a solar plus storage product. Right now we're just in solar, but we do want to make it a solar plus storage.
Like costs holding you back still, even like in like Hawaii or something, you think?
Well, in Hawaii it makes perfect sense because you're competing against oil-powered generation, which is like 30 cents, and I think Hawaii also mandates if you're going to put in solar, you need to back it up with storage. Puerto Rico, I think, is the same, but I'm not sure how hard they're enforcing that right now.
Yeah, from a construction standpoint, it doesn't, it's usually dictated by the owner or the developer. From us, and not to sound ugly, but storage doesn't do anything for us because storage shows up in a Connex. I unload it, drop it, hook it up, and there's not a lot of construction to it. It's all in whoever's purchasing it and whoever bought it and whoever spec'd it out. So on that aspect, but schools, I mean, we're linemen. I mean, it's we may put suits on, but at the end of the day, so lineman schools all across the nation, any kind of apprenticeship programs. Now on the office side, I mean, all of my, I hire assistant project managers and then train them to be project managers. So my first assistant project manager actually has a WIN degree, was this year, and I think he graduated from Tech. So but this year's the first time I've ever hired anybody who had an actual WIN degree. Quite honestly, he belongs working with a developer instead of me, but I've got him, so you can't have him.
I think you had a question. Yeah.
So we heard a lot about engineering jobs / construction jobs in the renewable industry. What about someone who doesn't have an engineering background or a construction background? I would think in terms of environmental permitting and regulations itself, I would foresee some permitting and licensing jobs. And then what about management systems, some IT jobs that would go with managing your environmental regulation policy stuff. So I have personally not seen anything like that on a job board. Could you shed some light on that?
I'll take the beginning part and you can come in. I know for the environmental permitting side, there's a lot of consultancy companies, so not really the EDP, especially not those guys down there, but companies like DNVGL, AWS Street Power UL, those are the type of companies that would have more of those environmental compliance side. And then also I know a lot of the developers, maybe shed light on it, are looking into like big data, so SCADA, IT operations to maximize, or also to do system monitoring for wind turbines and solar farms. But the jobs are out there. I think that for the data side, it is now starting to come up to fruition. And for a recruitment company, we're starting to look at a lot of those type of roles coming up, and along with energy storage, just because I think it's still a little bit out, but we're looking into those type of roles, or those roles.
No, that's good. Okay. Capture.
Yes, ma'am.
You alluded to the issue about people changing companies. Can you say a little bit more without being uncomfortable?
Oh, no, you can't make me uncomfortable here. It's, linemen are known for,
Loyalty.
yeah, just switching for the highest dollar. Most of us live on the road, so the idea of not being home is, it's regardless of where your paycheck's hitting you, you don't really care, and most of them, and they get that gypsy mentality. Unfortunately, a lot of them do. Those of us who have been in wind for over a decade now, unfortunately, get a lot of that as well. I mean, we built Flat Ridge 2, which was at that time the largest wind farm in the world. It was BP Wind, Blattner was the main, we were a sub under Blattner. we moved into a city where there was 500 population with a 700 person staff for that wind farm at peak. So when you move into areas like this, I mean, you live in RVs, you live in hotels, and you stay there for a year. So the idea of where the home base is or where your office is located doesn't really matter because you're out on a job. So when that constant day by day going to my office isn't really in that mentality, they lose that loyalty to the company, if you will. So there's some colorful descriptions for that, but they will switch for $1 due to that. It's a different, when I moved into the office 12 years ago, 13 years ago, you go into the office, you build a relationship with the people around you, it becomes your family, so your work is as important to you as your home life. When you're working in the field, your crew is your family, and if Bill or Jane gets laid off or finds another project that's making $2 more an hour and then tells the rest of us, next thing you know, you lost a whole crew because all of us want that extra $2. So there's a lot of rotation. We joke at AWEA each year, we all come to see who's wearing what name tag for what company you're with. So it's unfortunate sometimes, I guess.
All family.
Oh, yeah.
In the construction side of the wind business, it's you've got a core group that have pretty much been there since day one when it started the construction started in the U.S. And you build a project, you and all the guys, you finish it. Well, if you're working for one of the major constructors, they might or they might not have another project for you to go from there to. If they don't, you get, some of the guys, they live from paycheck to paycheck, and if they don't work, their family doesn't eat. So they're going to try to find something, and if you're a superintendent or a crew foreman, like Clint said, that's your family. That crew is they're just as important to you as your wife and kids back at the house. And you're going to try to help them find something, and you find something that's good for them. Well, that company, if they've got something that's good for you, the whole crew, they're packed up and headed over there. So there's a lot of moving around, but it's basically the same people with an influx of some newer hands, because a lot of us, we're getting old. And we've got just a few years left, and we want to go fishing and catch up on some hunting that we've missed over the years. So
and try not to think about it in a bad way. Just like he's talking about, when the project is over with, if you don't have backlog for another project, I mean, 700 people move into an area. Granted, that's more of an extreme nature, but if that company doesn't have somewhere for 200 people to go, that's a project-driven company. It's not like it's a hard feelings thing. They're going to go to wherever the work is, whoever picked up the last project, or as we say in estimating, whoever missed the most on the last bid. That's the one who got the next one. So don't look at it in a negative light.
I think, yes, you in the red.
So Texas, we have incredibly inexpensive utilities here, and largely, due to natural gas. It's really inexpensive here, and it's really abundant. I mean, are y'all seeing anything happen in the marketplace, or do y'all anticipate anything on the horizon that will make renewables more competitive in the marketplace with traditional sources of power?
Yeah. Here's our advantage over natural gas. We're free. There's no fuel cost.
If it's free, why don't we get it free then?
Because that's good. Because we've got to build the things up front. So in markets like Texas, the price we can offer compared to natural gas powered plants is in most cases lower at the wholesale level. Okay, what you're seeing on your bill is the retail level, and I wouldn't wade into that, but that's why it's not zero. But it has dragged down power prices for a while now, and you haven't seen those increases because of that increased renewable penetration.
And I would say that the easiest way to make wind and solar competitive is take away everyone else's incentives. And everyone cries and whines when wind gets an incentive or solar gets an incentive. If you take away the incentives for everyone across the board, wind wins naturally. Solar is third, I think natural gas is second. Oil and gas doesn't even compete anymore. I saw a thing we as biased, of course, but that they said even nuclear couldn't even compete against wind and solar when you take away all the incentives and all the government givebacks and everything else. So make it fair and it'll work its way out.
Yes, sir.
I've seen some different numbers that analyze this. What is the cost per megawatt to, for solar and wind to build it? And then how long does it take to pay it off versus, say, natural gas, when considering you don't have to pay for fuel? I know it's about $1 million a megawatt to build a combined cycle gas power plant, give or take.
I think,
How does solar and wind compare to that?
I think, for the sake of the panel, that would be a good question, kind of take offline with the guys.
Yeah.
So I'm to try to keep the focus on, questions that you guys have about transitioning from the current industry into renewables. But we can talk about that afterwards. Yes?
So from a supply chain standpoint, how much of it is domestic, how much of your sourcing is international, and what type of opportunities do you see folks wanting to get, further down in that supply chain for solar and
I missed half of that.
Come grab the mic here.
Could you say that louder?
regarding the supply chain, how much of it is international and how much of it is domestic, and what opportunities do you see for people to get involved in, not necessarily construction standpoint, but supplying maybe turbine blades and solar panels or ancillary parts to solar
Well,
vehicles?
I mean, you're the procurement expert. Correct me if I'm wrong, but most of the things nowadays we're building more and more in the States almost every day, aren't we?
Yep.
So.
Yeah,
The supply chain is a global supply chain, just like every other industry. There is a lot of domestic assembly on parts. So, for instance, nacelles on turbines are assembled most of the time domestically somewhere. There's factories throughout the U.S. that manufacture the components. There's big ones in Colorado, for example, from one of the suppliers. But it's a global supply chain, and you've got to find your little piece in it and identify what those domestic supply chain base is on various subcomponents. I was just talking specifically about wind turbines, but there's a lot of other stuff that goes into building a facility. The control buildings, all of those are domestically sourced. The substation equipment.
You got to more broaden your outlook on it. So and unfortunately we get tunnel vision on this, and you've been doing this longer than I have, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but if you focus in on the major components to a solar farm, you instantly think the panels. Or you think of a wind farm, you instantly think the turbines. There are so many other things that are going into these construction. I mean, for example, the panels, the steel they're sitting on, the racking systems. I mean, most of those are built here in the States. It's not competitive to ship that stuff over.
The polysilicon that's used to make the panels is manufactured in the U.S. and we ship it to China, who then manufactures it, and then they ship us the module back. It's a global supply chain. I mean,
I think Solar City actually manufactured the panels.
Yeah, that's right. They're building a huge plant up in Buffalo in Europe.
And also Canada has the best one in the world.
Well, yeah, Canadian Solar, but they a lot of their stuff comes from Korea. Don't let them lie to you. But also think of the high voltage portions of it. And granted, I'm more biased on that one, but all of the transformers, the pad mount transformers that go outside some of the nacelles, those are all built either in Mexico or in the U.S. The bollards, the little things, the pads, all of the foundations, all that's here.
DC cables, combiner boxes,
main power transformer.
usually All local.
Well, I was thinking the steel structures for transmission or substation. I mean, those all over the U.S.
But I guess if your question was, so what elements of the supply chain is domestic? I guess our answer is there's a ton of it.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for something that's supplying a wind farm or a solar farm during the entire construction phase, there's a lot of
Just
of
broaden
domestic.
your search.
Right.
Don't think of just the major components. Think of everything that goes into it. And you can Google search, what does it take to build a wind farm? We did this not too long ago when I was doing a training, and it pulled up a wind farm and literally everything that goes with a wind farm. You can just start picking things out, the steel and whatnot, and then just Google search, or Bing search, whatever. Where does this build? Where is that? And then that will immediately expand what that farm is touching and what your capabilities are, your possibilities of employment are.
Good points. Yes, sir.
From the operator and developer side, can you speak to some of the roles or opportunities that you would look for an MBA candidate to fulfill?
No. I mean, that's a hard question to ask because MBAs can do a lot of things, right? So there's a ton of opportunity. When I'm hiring for my team, I don't look for an MBA versus non-MBA. I look for ability, but as an owner or operator, I mean, there's a ton of jobs in the origination or power marketing roles that could be useful. That could use an MBA type mentality on those. Obviously, financial analysis and investments and modeling utilizes those skills. So every transferable skill that on the business side of things could use that MBA degree. I know we're hiring for a ton of positions that have those kind of criteria.
You're heading up an engineering whole company.
Well, in Houston, we're really not looking for MBAs. I've hired one PE in 3 years. I've hired a bunch of designers here in Houston. Getting ready to hire another PE.
So it may not be as important maybe as originally thought. It might be the
Like traditional
takeaway.
oil and gas, if you got a petroleum engineering degree and you want to get an advanced degree, an MBA was kind of a logical, step from there, but that's not so much true for the renewable side.
Yeah, I mean, from the recruitment standpoint, and kind of addresses those concerns you guys had about education. I think the biggest driver, and like everybody said in the beginning, it's not really your core, your experience if you've worked in renewables. It's not. It's that energy, that drive, your ambition, and your willingness to learn. That's key. I think that if you guys put that along with your resumes or in an interview, we portray that. And, feel free. I think Sue has my contact information. We can talk about interview preps to get that across. That will probably do more than trying to figure out, hey, what if I get this one degree? Because you're specifying. And the benefit of renewables versus oil and gas. I did oil and gas career for almost 3 years. Is that oil and gas is very specific, right? I'd have this A degree and this specific experience in reservoir engineering to qualify for this one job. And with renewables,
Planted side or the renewable side especially, there's no such, I don't hire anyone to do one thing. If you do one thing, I probably wasn't going to hire you. So we're very multifaceted. So go into it thinking that I have this skill, but I want to learn these other 4, and they'll probably let you learn all 5, I promise.
And from the engineering side, we're the same way. We want people that can do more than one thing. We try to stay lean and mean, if you will. We want to be able to cross over and do different things. I may be designing one day. I may be working on project management of something else another day. I may be out in the field doing inspection that afternoon. I personally, am going all over the place, and I want all of my guys and ladies to be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, I was gonna piggyback on what you said about, when you said about the petroleum engineers exactly looking for that, degree and job type. And I feel, so apparently that's not what's happening in the renewables, but my struggle has been that same, I feel that I'm kind of as the etiquette of my degree, my engineering degree, and that it's been harder to find, a job in the renewables because I would not necessarily have the experience, in either solar or wind. So I was wondering if you have any advice to give for people in the same, kind of in the same situation. Because you talked about people now that would, get specific degree attached to wind or solar, or that maybe have even, had experiences with solar and wind. So how can you compare? You might be a really motivated person and all that, but I feel like if you're really starting from scratch and you don't necessarily have any experience in solar and wind, you might be a struggle, because I don't know if the company that's going to take you on is going to be willing to, have to babysit you a little bit at the beginning to, get you started.
Yeah, I want to hand that over to Clint and Steve, but you have a structural engineering degree, right?
Yeah.
As you have it, and a master's, correct? Okay. That's over to you guys.
Well, the assistant project manager I hired that has a wind degree, I didn't know he had a wind degree until after I hired him. And so, it was in no portion of my process whatsoever. It was a conversation. We sent out applications, or we posted the job. I think Brian, or equivalent to Brian, found him, brought him to me. I have a degree. That's literally what I saw. And here's my experiences, which is basically nothing. He was straight out of school. So it was a conversation. It was his attitude, his willingness to do things. One of the biggest selling points I explained to him was that, are you okay with going into the field to learn? And he kind of hem-hawed a little bit about that. He said, well, I want an office job. And I said, well, there's an office trailer on my job site, and it's still an office job. Do you want the job? And he was like, well, yeah, I get to go to the field. So that excited him. He thought, okay, now I get to go out. So be flexible in what you're saying. Maybe don't obviously try to sell yourself, but don't focus on one thing. Try to talk about you as a person. Hey, I like to do these things. I don't mind doing this. Titles are a funny thing. And this is me personally. This is not a Wilbros thing. But if you walk into an interview with me and you're like, I need this title, you didn't get hired. And that's a me thing. I've had many titles, from grunt to some that I can't repeat here. And it's not about the title, it's about the job. I'm the vice president of construction right now, and I can promise you that if there's trash in my parking lot of my wind farm, I will be out there picking up trash on my way to the trailer. There's no job beneath me, and you can't be that guy or gal or person. Good.
And as a structural engineer, there's room in the electrical design for we've got structural engineers on staff. And in fact, we may be looking for another one right now. Let me have your card before.
Yeah, success right there.
No, seriously, all of the major firms here around Houston, if they're doing transmission work for CenterPoint, Entergy, any of the other Texas, New Mexico Power, any of the other major utilities, don't just think specifically renewable, think globally on utilities.
Okay.
For someone with the structural skills that I'm sure you have, you ought to be able to pick up something in a heartbeat.
Don't limit yourself.
Yeah. Don't tie yourself down.
Okay.
I'm going to take one more question. Yes, sir.
So as a soon-to-be graduating senior, and a student with friends who are interested in renewables but feel like they can't get into it, what efforts are your companies making to seek out students or let them know that these kind of jobs are out there and you don't necessarily need to be specifically in that industry during school?
We have a young adult program that we go to the schools and and I'm not the right person to ask that question to on that one, but we have, Wilbrow's itself has a program, so.
I mean, we've gone to a lot of career fairs and tried to make ourselves known to people. Sometimes, especially students in universities, just don't know, especially in a place like Houston where you can get drowned out by the oil and gas industry. So we've made an effort to at least get our postings out to graduates.
For us at M&S, we work closely with the electrical engineering department at Texas A&M University. We haven't made the push with the University of Houston or with Rice. We haven't gotten to that point here in Houston yet, but I do see that coming. You know, we try to post any vacancies on LinkedIn. We post on Indeed, our company webpage. We advertise on it. You know, we try to spread the word. You know, all of the employees at M&S, you know, if we, as soon as we know something's available out there that we are needing someone with certain type of skills, we try to, you know, spread the word among our network of people to see if there's someone that could fit the bill.
I think Sir in the green shirt had a question for a while.
Sure. Not a jobs question, but the status of high voltage DC transmission lines. I know there's a local company that's advertising that. Comment on that if you have any.
We can comment on that one offline. That one's because that's still a pipe dream for a lot of these. There's been, okay, let's put it this way. There's a project DC KB line that I have worked on the pre-construction for at least 7 times in the last decade. Great idea. I've built DC converters in Mexico and U.S. back and forth across the border with ABB in 2004, 2005. But yeah.
Besides California, there's a big DC high voltage in California. That's the only one that I'm aware of. Is there other others?
There's others.
Yeah.
I need to take probably one more question because I want to give enough time for you guys to come up and talk to the panel one-on-one. So I'll take yours and then you can come up afterwards.
Okay, in terms of percentage, what is the average of your business located in Central or South America? If so, what kind of service do you provide there?
We, at M&S Engineering, we haven't done anything in South or Central America. We are licensed in, I believe it's Peru. Our principal owner has been licensed in Peru now for about 6 or 8 months, with the thinking that there's fixing to be something down there that we want to bid on.
Well, at least expansion
We're,
is something.
you know, we're looking, but we haven't made the jump yet.
Yeah, I mean, we operate and own in Mexico, just south of the border, and we want that to be a much bigger market for us. So right now it isn't, and the Mexican market has seen some incredible growth stories in the past few years. They've opened up the market. It's a lot more liberal and in terms of market policy. So wind, solar has been coming in at record lows in that country. And there are a lot of developers moving into that country and a lot of construction, I'm sure that's happening as well.
Wilbrow's has worked in 71 countries in its history. We are still have the capability of working, I think, in 42 of those countries. I personally am responsible for North America, so I handle Mexico, U.S., and Canada from the renewable side. I have got lots of developer clients that are down in Mexico, but we need their AMD is the equivalent of a WIA down there. It's we need them to help get some more policies across before that becomes very viable. There's a lot of developers that have bought into the auctions. They have the rights. They're moving forward, but the more those companies started asking questions after they bought into the auctions, the more they realized that Mexico wasn't quite ready for certain things. Now, they've made leaps and bounds over the last 18 months, 16 months. I'm on the AMD newsletters or whatnot, so I get at least a weekly, if not every other week, email from AMD about what the Mexican government has now, this new policy that they're revising, or this one that they're revising. It will come. It'll probably be right after the U.S. boom. Mexico has got a huge growth that they want to do. They've got some very aggressive numbers they want to hit before 2020. I personally don't think they're going to reach them, but they're looking all the way to 2030. And they show no signs of slowing down. So even if they do the government, there is to bring in expats and things of that nature. So it's possible.
Thank you.
But,
Great.
Yeah. I have a question.
You got 2 minutes.
I know he's talking about school, from U of H, they do have energy programs. So, and you talk about that you hire somebody from Texas Tech for wind energy. So U of H, they do have a program for energy. I'm not sure, you guys, you normally go and take students for internship, can you talk about that if someone is from U of H versus someone who is really from Texas Tech and has a degree in wind energy, and U of H have a program with energy? Is that?
Yeah, so personally, and this is not Wilbur's, this is not, and I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying this, I don't care what piece of paper you have, personally. I care about the person I'm hiring and the experience and the knowledge of the person I'm hiring. I don't care if you've got an associate's, a high school diploma, or a bachelor's, or a master's, or whatever other little initials you have behind your name. I hire people for them and their abilities. If I need an accountant, then they need to be, there's maybe certain skill sets and experiences that I have to go for. But the mere fact that, Aldo is his name, the fact that he had been at Texas Tech when literally had nothing to do with me hiring him. So he could have been from U of H, he could have been from a lineman school, he could have been from literally anywhere.
I'm going to just quickly wrap it up. I think all you guys are coming out. Like I said, I wanted to save at least 20 minutes for you guys to come up and meet and greet with the speakers that we had. So again, thank you, gentlemen, for coming out. Thank you, HVAC, for in closing, hopefully you guys take away some bit of knowledge. And I think the big consensus for these individuals was, not just skill sets, but your ability and willingness to learn. So, like I said, I'll pass my contact information. If you guys want to go through some interview preps, I can pass you some information of how to better prepare yourself if you ever face Nicole, Clint, or Steve in an interview, or people like them.
Except for Clint, they'll be pretty easy.
Yeah. So again, thank you all for coming out, and thank you, Sue.
And please check out our website, HREG, to see about other upcoming events. Thank you for coming.
I've got a wind farm in Oklahoma I'm finishing up. And then
Yes,
right now we're just building backlog for, actually we just got on EDPR's bidders list. We're getting through the process.